This is Hootie Hoot from the Sports Deli. I'm from Detroit. I played 4 years of college basketball. I've coached men's and women's college basketball for 23 years. I have a beautiful daughter. I'm a life coach. This is the first Black History Month since the racial reckoning this past summer, since the death of George Floyd and the shooting of Jacob Blake, and the first Black History Month where we have seen a collective voice from white America in a way that we've never seen before, from the white athletes, professional athletes in particular, but not in football. The people that come to mind that are really outspoken now are all players from the NBA. Sports and activism seem to have always gone hand in hand with the black and brown and African American communities. This is a window of opportunity. I had a discussion with a police officer the other day in a restaurant. He saw my shirt that said, "Say her name." They still have to have the talk with their kids or their grandkids or their nieces and nephews about what to do if you're pulled over by a police officer. As I watched videos honoring quarterbacks during Black History Month, the quarterback position. So it is the most important position in sports. And the only reason they're not as popular is because they wear a helmet, in my opinion. And, someone like Tom Brady is maybe an exception to the rule. But why aren't more white quarterbacks standing up for what's going on? And so that's something that's probably one of the most troubling parts to all of this is, and I had this discussion with Doug Gottlieb, who is a syndicated sports talk radio host and a basketball announcer, and he's involved in March Madness, played college basketball, played professional basketball. He's Jewish, like I am. And he said you don't have to stand up for things. You can do things your own way. And I just, this time it just feels different. This time it's not just a bummer. I just feel like you have a responsibility if you're Tom Brady, if you're Peyton Manning. I just think it's so tone deaf and so insensitive to continue to do your shows or make your videos and have your Super Bowl celebration parties and all your videos with Gronk, and Peyton Manning's done a great job with his show. But Aaron Rodgers has spoken out a little bit about social injustice. Matthew Stafford, as much as I don't think he's a top tier quarterback, and he's been very frustrating to have as our quarterback as a Detroit Lions fan, he stood up for something far more important than numbers that you'll retire with or wins. And I would argue that Tom Brady's history and legacy has taken a hit because of his lack of outspokenness when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement. But so many of the NFL owners, like Jerry Jones, have been silent in all of this. Far too silent. And so I'm very disappointed in Tom Brady, who will not publicly support a cause that Doug Williams said on this show, that a white person in the locker room who supports a cause as important as fighting against systemic racism, especially in the NFL, is something that will never be forgotten by African American players. Forget about everything else. And this is where I think a lot of white players in the NFL and white owners have missed the boat, like Tom Brady. When people say some people aren't cut out to be outspoken, like when Doug Gottlieb shared that with me, he thought that Tom Brady wasn't necessarily cut out to speak out against social injustice or political issues. Well, that may be true, but I still feel like he has a responsibility, because he's the face of the league, to stand up for social injustice. Martin Luther King didn't want to be outspoken either, but he knew that the greater good required him to be who he became, to evolve, to be a voice for his people. And so if we're going to bridge this gap, We need everybody involved in the NFL. We need the owners and Tom Brady and all the white faces of the NFL, the media. There needs to be pressure on the media. Advertisers need to pull out if collectively and individually teams do not start to see in the next hiring cycles consistently hire African Americans, and eventually we see owners in those positions as well. This is for the first time, despite all the heroes in the past that have stood up and asked and begged and preached for white America to join forces and lock arms and be a collective voice, as strength in numbers has been shown to change things, like the WNBA did with the state of Georgia in this recent election and the runoff. And as we transition, speaking of the WNBA, what a great day for the women of the WNBA, in particular Renee Montgomery, who has played for 2 decades in the league, most recently with the Atlanta Dream. And she won a national championship at UConn in 2009. She won 2 WNBA titles with the Minnesota Lynx in 15 and 17. And for her to be a part owner now of the Atlanta Dream, and to see Renee accomplish such a wonderful endeavor and be a part of this change of leadership, where the former minority owner who refused to support the Black Lives Matter movement, even though she was a minority owner of a professional team that had the makeup of not only women, but 70% of those women were African American, is just a great day. And the other thing I want to talk about was the recent comments by Zulatan Ibrahimovic. This is a soccer player who basically told LeBron James to shut up and dribble once again. Understanding where we are now is another example of white privilege. It's another example of someone who's tone deaf, who's out of touch, and we're not there yet where that gap is bridged enough where the majority of people, a lot of those, the 70 million people that voted for the 45th president, can hear it from either side in terms of the 2 different sets of laws in this country, the people that are on those different sides of the law. And until that happens, then we all need to be a collective voice to bridge that gap. And I want to be clear about something. There's a difference to a degree when a complete off-base guy like this tells LeBron, and basically all other athletes of the black and brown community, to basically shut the fuck up. You can't be hypocrites or force things down people's throats. Also, which is not something that I want this tone to be, but we want it to be more from an educational standpoint, that we don't want to be patient anymore, that we're not going to tolerate it anymore, that we're going to be anti-racist, not just against racism, and that more whites are stepping up more than ever to educate and listen and learn and help mobilize and pay it forward and be a part of policy changes. And speak out against idiots like this who tell people to just play their sports and be quiet. It's never too late to talk to a person who doesn't look like you, to read a book. I'm reading Just Mercy now by Brian Stevenson. I've listened to Jamel Hill a lot. I've had some correspondence with her. I've been complicit for a long time and quiet on this issue. Maybe not as quiet as others and maybe not as loud as others. But I won't any longer. And if that means losing more friendships and acquaintances and family members and jobs and clients during the rest of my days, so be it, but I will be on the right side of history.